10 cards that address this question, so I'm going to kind of summarize it for you. There are many questions about the decision being made to put unarmed safety advocates in the building as opposed to deploying armed officers. There's questions about whether that's budget related, whether or not we should have trained active shooter police officers in the buildings, but probably 10 of the questions deal with that armed versus unarmed security guard question. So if you want to maybe take a few minutes, name the chief.
I know we've been dealing with that with the chief of the mayor. Want to go over that first? Chief?
I don't know that we need armed security guards in our schools. I'm not sure that it's conducive to the learning environment, especially younger kids. And I think reasonable precautions.
Right. It's the external that we're thinking about, not the internal, like the high school kids. Now we're thinking external. You have to think, hey, we're not worried about the high school kids. Some fighting that these police need to control. We need to keep people out of the school.
Sure, and I think that what I talked about earlier about reasonable precautions would address that concern.
I'm sorry?
What I talked about earlier about how Newtown and the Danbury has taken reasonable precautions, to minimize those risks, I think that would address that concern.
Chief, we're being reactive as opposed to proactive.
Exactly.
I think the issue is, first of all, there's a vast difference between high school students and elementary students, right? So the program that's in place at the high school is a nationally recognized program that's pretty much done at every high school across the country. Columbine had a school resource officer in the building on the day of the shootings there. So those, although he wasn't in the building like he was supposed to be, that's a long story, but those, that program is more than just a security program. It's to build rapport back and forth between the police. It's to build connections and to break down barriers between adolescents and the PD. So it's a little bit of a different program than a straight security person. The issue really isn't whether or not you should have somebody with an armed thing in terms of philosophy. That's a discussion that the superintendent, the board, etc. can have. It's the practicality of being able to do that. Forget about the finances of being able to do that. Just let me run some numbers by you so you understand what that would mean. We have 13 elementary schools and a significant amount of parochial schools and daycare centers throughout the city. Okay, so, but let's just take, for example, the elementary public schools for sake of conversation. In order for us to post an officer in every elementary school, every day of the school year, we would need to hire about 25 to 30 new officers above and beyond our current manpower. That's what you would need. And the reason is you need about No, we don't. We can't do it. Because once, what we did the week, prior to vacation, we did no other policing in the entire city. Nothing else got done. And so when somebody got robbed or there was another kind of crime throughout the city, we couldn't respond because we had all of our officers deployed in all the buildings, and it was the right thing to do. I'm not suggesting it's not. But long term, it's not sustainable. The first time an officer takes a sick day, now I don't have another officer to bring in to be able to cover him in that school for the day. But getting back to the manpower, you would need about 25 to 30 new officers to do it on a sustainable, everyday level. You need about an officer and a half per building. Each police officer gets 4 weeks vacation. So if they take a vacation day, I've got to have another backup officer to cover them. So, but it doesn't just stop with the elementary school, because probably the parochial schools will say, listen, we want an officer too. Daycare centers will say, what's wrong with my kid? My kid deserves, let me finish. My kid deserves, you know, a cop in the building as well. So now you need about 50 to 70 officers. Okay, so let's assume, hold on, let me finish now. I understand you're upset, just listen. So let's assume that we need 30 officers. The most seats we get at the academy each year is about 10, about 2 per quarter we can put at the academy. That would take us about 3 to 4 years just to staff up, assuming that there's no other retirements in the police department, to be able to have enough people to put them each one in each building. Beyond that, we would probably be the only city in Connecticut that would actually do that. I know Stanford's going with the same system that we have, which is the safety advocates in their elementary buildings. And I know some other school districts are doing the same. Because I don't have enough officers to do it. We could never do it. There would be many days when you would never have an officer at all ever in the building.
So we're not ahead of the curve then, we're still behind.
Nobody's ahead of the curve because nobody's going to do that in Connecticut because there's not enough officers out there. There's just not enough manpower to do that and cover your normal policing.
We don't have tax money to pay for it.
I'm not even talking about the tax implications of that. Let's not even talk about the money. It's the practicality of being able to do it. If you want to talk about money, we can talk about money. Each officer is about $100,000. So if you've got 30 to 40 new officers, that's $4 million a year, not counting all the other policing, overtime things that you have to do. So
That unarmed guard is not a deterrent. Just an extra
Realistically, an active shooter comes in, what are they going to do? You got Newtown all over again.
Yeah.
You're wasting your money with an unarmed. The only thing that's going to stop somebody coming in with a weapon is a police officer who's trained an active shooter. That is the only thing. That's the only place you need to spend your damn money. I don't understand.
And a lot of these schools are so far from the police department that the response time will take them 2 minutes.
now we have a roving patrol on
But
top
where
of
is that
the...
roving patrol? It could be 90 seconds away. That's
Right.
90 seconds too long. We can have 10 seconds at the door with the police car.
I hear you. Again, the practicality, what you're asking, is nobody in Connecticut is going to do that.
So
Nobody.
if your independent study comes in and says you need a police officer in every school, you're going to say we can't do that?
I'm going to say unless there's significant changes in how you hire, who you hire, and whether there's significant resources put in by the state to be able to accommodate a massive amount of training. It's not just going to be Danbury. We're not alone. Newtown will have the same discussion that they'll have to have in the very community. Brookfield, Bethel, New Fairfield, they're all going to say, well, we want an officer in our building. So the pressure on being able to train up officers and find enough qualified candidates without changes to who you can hire and how you can hire them will be very difficult. I just want to give you an example. When we put out for a test to hire a police officer, we'll get about 300 to 400 applicants. About 70 to 80% of those applicants don't pass the initial test. So now you're down to about 200. Once you get to that point, and we create a list of maybe 150, 160 people, only 1 out of 10 actually becomes a police officer in the city of Danbury. 9 of them fail the background, psychological, polygraph, or any other part of the testing
What about the
procedures.
unarmed guard that's in the schools now? Are they background checked and same as the police?
Oh yes, absolutely.
So they're vetted just like a police officer?
No, they're not. They don't go through a polygraph. Are you talking about?
The unarmed guards that are at the other...
Oh yeah, they have to do background and they have to do fingerprinting. You know, anybody that comes into our building has to be background checked and fingerprinted, like a teacher would be. But they don't go through a polygraph, psychological, and all these other things. We hope to hire a lot of retired ex-police officers.
So can I ask, if you're hiring a lot of ex-retired police officers, why can't they be armed?
That's a policy decision for the Board of Ed. It's not my policy decision. If they have a license to conceal, to carry a concealed weapon,
Exactly, why can't they?
that's up to
carry it in
them.
school?
That-
Then it's not an issue of not enough police officers.
right, and that's not my call. That's a policy decision by the Board of Ed.
I think we hear you.
You're the mayor.
We hear you, we hear your concerns and your wishes, and it's gonna have to be an action item that we have to look into as the Board of Ed to see if it's something that's viable or not. So it is something that I understand your concerns, and we will definitely take that into consideration and look at that as one of our options. That we can do it tomorrow? No, I mean, that's not realistic. That's not why we're here. We're trying to solve these problems. We're trying to increase the security for our children. So please understand that we are all working together and truly understand how you feel.
What about...
If we could move on to another question, because we understand the point. We understand what you're
We
saying.
can move on
If
to
we
another
could,
question, man, but listen, none of these cameras, these staggered patrols, tell me how they stack up against the Bushmaster. These unarmed guards, how do they stack up against a Bushmaster?
Why not an armed guard?
Okay, but your point is the same, is that you prefer to have someone armed at the schools. That's something we as the Board of
This
Ed...
animal circumvented all of these security measures, though. Okay, there was a camera in Newtown. We have that. Great. What are we doing? The Bushmaster is the equalizer. It can take care of all of these security measures that you're talking about. Okay, if you have a staggered patrol, an animal can take a look. Oh, the police just came. Time to wreak havoc. This tragedy happened in minutes. Okay, the staggered police patrol leaves, and it's his time to go to action. So none of this, I mean, none of this can prevent another tragedy. This tragedy could easily happen again with all these supposed security measures that you're putting in place.
I think the board just responded, they'd have to look at that. I said to you, there's no easy answer here. I mean, and, you know, factually, there was guns at Columbine. I mean, I don't want to go down that road with you. You all read, you're sensible, you know where it goes. It's a policy decision. If we think guns, the board thinks guns need to be concealed on campus, they'd have to talk about that. But there's research indicating that guns don't necessarily stop with guns. I'm not saying it's the right or wrong thing to do. I don't get an argument. I think what they're saying is that we're listening to you. They're going to have to make a decision that is in the best interest of students, not in one individual or two. And they'll have that conversation among them as a board. They'll get advice from professionals. They'll get advice from, as I said before, you know, we don't want to make a rash decision. We want to be able to say that we're following good practice. We certainly don't want to drag our feet if there's something we need to do now. And putting guns into the school is not something I recommended to them right now. Can they do that? The mayor indicated it's their prerogative to do it. They can do it if they wish that it be done. Whether I recommend it or not is another thing that I have to study. I am very uncomfortable with that. That's not saying I'm right. I'm not saying that. We need to look at this. Just like I need to look at, do I have people exit the building when we've been trained not to exit the building when there's a known threat on the campus? I'm being told, yeah, you need to think about that. That kind of blows my mind. I need to rethink. This is a change. This is like the gentleman that got on the plane with the shoes. We're all taking our shoes off. This is not going away. We need to figure out what's best that we can do. And I think Mrs. Steichen answered you. We have to talk about it. It's the first time they've come together to discuss that. And that was the purpose of the time, to listen to what you have to say. That's why the council is here as well, for that purpose. That's the best I can tell you.
Can we have another question?
Sure, and there are a number of comments in that regard that we'll share with the board about speeding up response time, communicating quickly with the police department. There's a lot of comments here about ways to do that. The next category of questions are sort of outside the regular school day. What will we do for security for before and after school programs, for our parochial or non-public schools, something outside the traditional school day? Are there plans in place to deal with security in those contexts? And parochial and before and after school programs as well.
Sure. We've reached out to Dr. Baines, who's the superintendent of the parochial school system. We shared with her what we plan on doing this week. Contrary, I thought that the diocese, I thought that basically the way the parochial school system is that, particularly the Catholic school system, is that they would have one policy for the whole state, but they really don't. It's really up to individual parish to determine how they want to provide security for each individual school. So we had offered to her to be able to piggyback on with our program for training the safety advocates. Potentially, if they wanted to hire them, they would have to hire them, but we would let them be vetted through our personnel department, the background, fingerprints, and all the things that we need to do to make sure we know who's in there. We've offered all those services to them. And she was going to socialize that with each building principal and make a determination about what they would like to do. So they certainly we're opening up as much resources to the parochial school system as we can. Remember, we also have to make sure that we're taking care of the public school system as well. But we wanted to give them an opportunity to participate in some of these things. We also have offered up our police department to do surveys of their buildings as well. They've actually done some of the daycare centers already, and they're going to, it takes a little time, but they're going to continue doing that and updating their management plans in terms of emergency situations.
I'm sorry, I was talking about the last about something. We have reached out to the private and parochial schools. We sent them out an email today. There's a conference on Monday. The school systems are going through what we're doing right now, and they're having a thing on the active turf on Monday. They have people in to talk about guns in schools, cameras, emergency signaling systems. So there's a number of people attending that. We have some folks in town, and we also sent some material out to parochial schools if they want to join us, because we see it as a Danbury issue. The after-school areas for the secondary, they have a process up there, generally because of the athletics always have police on board. I've asked the fire marshal, who's here, I know, to work with our staff. Many of you may recall that in schools there used to be fences and gates and so forth. Those we have to, because of egress limitations, we can't use them as liberally as we would want. So we have to look at that to secure parts of the building. And right now, after school, we basically have our own staff that's in the supervision that we have to take another review upon. We've also asked a number of our elementary and middle school outside groups that we're limiting how long they'll stay in that building before we shut it down and inspect it. So we've had to take that step for security reasons. So we need to look at that much closer than we're looking at right now. Okay, anything you want to add? Is there any more of that? Questions?
Yep, another category of questions about violence prevention programs. Are there violence prevention programs in place or plans to implement them? One question cites a program that ran at one school called Rachel's Challenge, created by a Columbine family, proven to prevent school shootings. Questions about school social services and what kinds of support services we have in the classrooms to recognize students who may be at risk and to conduct violence prevention. So how does the district deal with those kinds of issues?
I'm going to turn it back to glass, but the side that we've been talking about has been prevention. We are looking at intervention. You need to know, some of the resources that we can put forward, but we really think the intervention is a key part. One of the individual in charge for the district is looking at some special assessments that are coming out now for that. We have been since a number of years looking at student writing as recent as today, and last week we were reviewing some literature put forward by students that we have concerns about. We have a system of referral. We have a medical advisor that we work with, and we have psychiatrists that we invite in to work with us. Saying that, we are looking at future budgets in terms of how we can maybe increase some of the social work programs that we do have. But I'll let Dr. Glass talk about that some more.
Hello everyone, it's nice to see you here tonight. Unfortunate topic, but it's good that you all came out. I need you to know up front that this is very personal for me. I moved my family 30 years ago to Newtown because it was a safe community with good schools. I participated in the hiring, orientation, and training of Dawn Oxbrock when she came here as Dawn Lafferty to Rogers Park Middle School, then supported her request to move to the high school, and then supported her desire to move to an elementary principal position in another community, and then supported her work in Newtown. Dawn and George are very good friends of ours. George was in my office today, and we had quite a long conversation. This was so traumatic for my family that my older son and his family were supposed to come up for Christmas from Virginia. My wife and I said we need to get out of town. I had been contacted 16 times at home by the London Times. The media that was in Newtown was unbelievable. So I just want you to know that I get what you're saying. We recognize the pain that this has caused. We have close family friends that had children that were killed in this massacre. We don't take this lightly in any possible way. It's very personal to many of us. I do want you to know a couple of things tying into your question. There are some things that we think we can help with and give all of us some more comfort. There are other things that we just don't think are realistic. Somebody called and said, well, we put metal detectors in the buildings. Adam Lanza would not have gone through a metal detector. When the security camera and the buzzers worked as it should have worked, and they wouldn't let him in, he shut up part of the window on the wall and walked right through. So in looking at things that sound good on paper, they're not necessarily good in operation. I was over at the magnet school with Mrs. Matowski, and there was an armed officer put in the school by the chief, and because we had 43 students from Newtown, we thought it might be a little bit more high risk. We also had the University Police from WestCon stationed up and down the boulevard going into the school. But as we're standing there, I'm looking at this heavily armed police officer with what I'm not a gun person, but I think he was carrying an assault rifle, seriously a formidable weapon. He was standing in the front lobby, and I'm thinking about the plan, because I helped design the footprint of that plan, and there were multiple doors in that building with an armed security, trained police officer in the front. People could have blown out the back and walked right in, and as the gentleman said, in Newtown it took 4 minutes for this whole thing to go down. So we're trying to be as vigilant as possible and as responsible to you as possible, and this means a lot to us. When my wife and I left and went down to Virginia to try and get away, the day we got there, I walked into a supermarket. Two women in front of me at the checkout counter were talking about Sandy Hook School in Newtown, Connecticut, with as much specificity, pretty much as we had in 30 years as residents there. We recognize that there has to be a reaction, but definitely the proactivity is the key to this in our opinion, and the mental health piece is another major key. As Paul Esteban said, 2006, there was a team that was put together. Lieutenant McNally, who was in the back a while ago, we worked together. We're not new to the table on this. We have very comprehensive safety and security plans, emergency preparedness plans. We've done training on this. We have flip books on this. We have a comprehensive program across the district for violence prevention. But I want you to know that you can't turn your back on this for a moment. We wear these badges. We have our crisis intervention teams that are mobilized in a minute. And the other thing I think you need to know, I think it may give you some degree of comfort. Clearly, Dr. Pasquarello and I have no expertise when it comes to the kind of expertise that Chief Baker has, or that Chief Harold has with the fire department, or Mayor Mountain has in running the city of Danbury. And as you hear us talking tonight, we're using our formal titles. But what you don't possibly know is that yesterday we were meeting, and it was Mark coming over saying, "Hey Bill, how's it going?" I said, "Mark, how's the flu? You got over it?" "Yeah." "And Al, how's it going with you?" "Good. How about you, Sal?" "And Jeff, what's that?" We're personal friends. We're colleagues. We recognize each other's expertise. This team came together in a heartbeat. Within minutes, the entire city had been mobilized. Sal and I have visited just about every classroom in this community. We did it in one day, checking on the teachers, checking on the kids, making sure the staff was okay. Tina and I, because the issue came up about King Street was an open campus, were equally concerned, possibly more, other than recognition that this is my child, how can we be more concerned about that? We do get that. Tina and I walked the building. We had blueprints out. We walked through shelter-in-place areas. I came back to Beaver Brook. Within about an hour and a half, Sal and Joe were back up at the campus going through the same thing. You heard Tina explain that she's working with the police department. When we put our plan together in 2006, if you drive through the city and you look at the buildings, you'll see big numbers on them. And people weren't sure, what's that about? Our officers have in their vehicles the ability to play a CD. It has a schematic of the building. If Sal or I or Joe or Kim, a member of the cabinet, call down to Chief Baker and say, "We think we have an active situation. There's an intruder. It may be an armed intruder. The question is whereabouts in the building." We believe it's the building, classroom 26. Within moments, you know how fast the folks move through town. They're in the building, they're in the complex, they're looking up at the building and they can see all the numbers. And that lets them kind of pinpoint that, and then they have their tactical response that they go into. The last thing I want to share with you is that all the folks that are up here that have professional responsibility in the city, at one time or another, we end up teaching adults based on our areas of expertise. Sal and I do a lot of training of graduate students who are teachers who want to become administrators or who are administrators who want to move up the ranks and become senior administrators. I know I speak for Sal. The piece that every one of these graduate students hates the most is the term scenario planning. Because we like to live in a black and white society. So tell me the answer, is it this or is it that? And with scenario planning, a scenario would be the example that I used a little while ago about the magnet school. It's a relatively large complex. So if we put a police officer who's armed in the front lobby and somebody comes in the back, a shooter, and shoots out the back window,
Why can't it be an armed guard, not a police officer?
if we have an armed guard and a police officer in the front, excuse me one second, please. If we have an armed guard and an armed police officer in the front of the building, or one in the front and one in the back, and somebody comes in the side, what do we do?
That still cuts the
Have
time.
10 seconds to respond then.
Just give me 1 second.
10 seconds.
Those are the scenarios that we've been running over and over and over again since 2006.
But there's no armed guards in the elementary schools. How have we gone over it and it hasn't been addressed yet?
And we do have that, and Chairman Steichen, Chairperson Steichen did say that we recognize that. We do have work to do as a board and as a city. It's definitely something to take under consideration.
That'll do away with all of your manpower issues with the police force. It's privatized. They have more than enough people that can bring in.
I hear you, and the only thing I would tell you is, you're gonna have to be very careful who you give a gun. An armed guard is not a certified police officer to walk around that building.
I work in federal,
So, I understand where you're coming from.
I work in a federal building in New York City, and if the federal government trusts them, they're better than the government. Why can't the cities do that?
Well, I'd be happy to hire anybody who works in the federal government building that's probably been trained by the federal government, certified to fire a weapon and own a weapon and own a weapon. Be fine, we'll do that. Send them our way, we'll hire them. But in terms of just people out there that are carrying concealed license, I would be
I'd be very
concerned.
leery of that.
Yeah, I would
But
be.
someone that's, there's many private big drinks company or Wackahat that.
Okay, I don't mention drinks, but I get you. We understand what you're saying. And I think the board will consider that as an option. You know, and if you're an ex-police officer who's retired, you've got to carry a concealed permit, that'll be a policy decision that the board will have to make about whether or not they want the weapon in the building. I get it.
And the last category of questions talks about the attitude and response of staff and how do we keep them vigilant and what steps will we take to make sure that, for example, people don't prop the doors open at a certain point in time, and this has all faded a little bit. How do we stop either parents or staff from holding the doors for each other, from making everybody or maintaining everybody in this security-minded state? And what steps do we think we can take to do that?
Right now, it's obvious what we're doing. We're moving through the plans and we're working through the plans. What are we going to do down the road? As someone said up here, I wish I'd have been notified sooner. Well, we need to think about that. You know, I still need to make the decision whether I can do that or not, but I'll have to figure that out. So next time, hope to God it never happens again. You know, we all do that, I know that. But if it does, how can we do it better? How can we respond better? How can we inform folks to alleviate any inhibitions they may have or worries? Regarding the safety items, what we've done specifically, we've added something to our monthly list. We tried to systemize it by the principals reporting to me that they've gone through the lockdown. So now we have some ideas of how lockdowns are going. Regarding the prop doors, these badges here that I'm wearing here, we ask everybody to wear them. And when I walk around the building, it's a matter of training. Where's your badge? Why don't you have it? I want everybody confronted. It's just all of us being much more diligent, and as we go through the years away from this, just continue to doing that. So we have procedures and policies, the tabletop stuff that we talked about. We're just going to have to conduct them more often. We're going to have to systemize it and make sure that we do that. We have people who like to leave the doors open. You know, we have people going around and pulling. One of the things with safety advocates, if we go there or not, their job would be to look around the building and make sure that the doors aren't propped, windows aren't broken, access areas are taken care of. So they would have a role other than the role of making sure who's coming in the building. There are other things that they can do at those buildings that could be helpful for us. So we just need to be diligent about that. I think right now everybody is. I get a call. The biggest thing that we have to do right now is go around in the morning when the food's delivered. That scares us. The doors are left open. and we've been talking to our managers in terms of locking those. We just need to do that regularly in our procedures, and just keep doing that as often as we can.
Can we ensure those same policies as far as doors prop? I mean, it's great that it's 15 degrees outside right now, but come springtime, summertime, when it gets 80, 90 degrees.
The answer is, can we, springtime, make sure we're as diligent when it's not as cold? The answer is, we have to. They're human beings and they're kids, you know it's going to happen. But we're the adults, we're in charge, we need to stop that, we need to pull the doors plug out and make sure that it's locked. I mean, we have to do that.
These people need to address the HVAC concerns in some of these older schools. My daughter's school in particular, it's so hot in the wintertime because you have an antiquated boiler, they have to open up windows. In the summertime, you can't, or when it's hot weather, you cancel school because you don't have air conditioning. So that means, again, windows are open, doors are open. That's an issue that needs to be addressed aside as all these security. Facilities needs to be looked at as a serious concern because now you're creating portals for people to come in.
Well,
What about when the kids are out for recess? You can't lock them up 24/7.
okay, the question here is, when we look at the facilities, make sure we look at the AC and the ventilation. I'm not saying that it hasn't been done in the past. It has been. Whether or not how we handle it. I think all of you adults can figure this out. If you're going to go down the road of egg with human resources, how can we do it capital? I think the mayor has said that, you know, immediately we're going to look at installing the locks and doing all that stuff. Some of the long-term stuff we're going to have to look at. The high school's got new furnaces and we've done that. We have to look at other possibilities. But to answer your question directly, we have to be vigilant of making sure that all of us who work in this district are making sure that doors are closed and making sure that windows are closed. I know that our head of facilities has gone over an orientation with the custodians. They have the safety check at night that they have to do, and in the morning. So we try to do that and keep doing that, along with some of the other suggestions.
Can we possibly look at the nomenclature that you're using currently for lockdown procedures, and perhaps specifically using the term soft lockdown? Because I think that creates an ambiguity in any one of many buildings in terms of what's the procedures in a soft lockdown.
To answer your question, yes, someone's going to look at that.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Yeah, I think we need to look at that and other things. Also, the warning, we want to make, I don't want to bore you, but there's so many people that interchange between buildings, as you said, that at one place, you know, Dr. Pasquarella may mean lockdown, another place may mean let's run, he's here. I mean, who knows? You know, we have to have continuity across the district, so we're looking at all of that, terminology and consistency. And the other part that drives us crazy, subs. What do they have? How do they do it? How do they react? So we're trying to, you know, come around that right now so that we have uniformity across the district. So we're working on that.
Dr. Pascarella, can I just say that I was really grateful that my daughter was in the high school on that Friday, because I truly believe that she was in a safer environment than had she been at the mall, at the movie theater, or on Main Street. So it's all That said, as a resident of Danbury, I truly appreciate and I'm very grateful that my daughter was very safe at the high school, and I'm sure that you're doing the right thing and as much as you can do. Just getting back just one step, Dr. Wilson, my condolences. I'm very sympathetic with how immediate it affected you. The only thing is that to be proactive. This kid was 20 years old, and I am definitely sure that there were red flags in the last 5 years. I know that he was homeschooled, whatever, but a little bit more of a proactive approach and more finances, more personnel to really pick up those red flags that could happen with our kids, anyone that could affect our community would be very much appreciated.
Your point is extremely well taken. Let me share something with the group very generically, and you'll understand why in a moment. And obviously there are things that we can and we cannot speak about. Information, as the mayor said, that we know, but we're just not at liberty to share. What I can tell you is today, one of our principals called and said, I have a concern. It was brought to me by a teacher I looked into it. I have reason to believe that there might be an issue here. Our pupil personnel team really came together. The school psychologist checked this, absolutely. Is there a trend line? Is there a pattern here over time, or is this appears to be an isolated incident? We walked through it. The principal actually went and got a writing journal from this youngster and went through the journal and saw some other indications that this might be a problem. Checked with the teacher, same kind of thing. We kept triangulating the data, as we call it. And today, the parents were brought in, and the whole situation was reviewed with them, and action has already been taken. So, I appreciate you putting this on the table. My earlier point really was the best way to deal with this is to be as proactive as possible. And in many, many ways, you may or may not agree with this, but in many, many ways, research is showing us and common sense tells us this is a mental health issue. There are crazy people out there who do crazy things. And it's very unpredictable. It's hard to know when this is going to happen. So the best way for us to approach it is to become routinized and have proactive ways in place and constantly practicing those.
That's true. And as we're sitting here, as community members, we also have responsibility to watch out for, not be paranoid, not think that everybody is nuts and going to blow us up. But we too, as community members, have a responsibility for our neighbors to make sure that they're safe and to view red flags. I mean, we're one community and we're all together. And Mark did a great job on CNN. Once again, I'm proud to be Danbury.
Look, if I could just say real quickly, just kind of dovetail what Bill said. I know that I always get late, but if you're trying to make sanity out of the insane, or find reason out of unreasonableness, you're never going to understand why or how this happened. In the sense that, as Bill said, there are just things that happen in life that are unexplainable. And your comment about intervention, I think, is key. Although in this situation, from what I know of the situation, we had a person who was very wealthy, who didn't necessarily have their child as a student, so nobody could be around him to identify these kinds of behaviors or potential where it was going. And it was very much a devolving situation that resulted in this tragedy. But we can learn from Columbine. And in the Columbine incident or tragedy, one of the perpetrators did write journal entries, and he did turn in assignments to his teacher of English that were very dark, very macabre, and spoke to mass killings and wrote long essays on Nazis and things like that. Just had fixations on stuff that really isn't healthy for somebody of his age. Now the teacher did elevate that to the counselor, and the counselor really didn't do a lot with it. And what happened is that it was about 3 weeks before he actually took, along with the other young man, the carnage that they took in that high school. So since that time, we've learned from that, and I think what Bill's driving at is we take it very seriously. But we can never, let our guard down, because you really, those kids planned that act for months, and they had weapons, and they had guns, and they were building bombs, and they had schematics of the building, and yet nobody, no adult, no parent, no teacher, no guidance counselor picked up on that until the tragedy occurred. So your point is well taken about trying to get in there a little bit closer. And then one other thing I just want to mention is, just going back to this issue, I'm still kind of flipping about people walking in and not being challenged in buildings. Prior to this incident, we were lazy. We did get lax. We did. I mean, let's be honest. I couldn't get in, but some of you could get in, which I could never figure out. But we got lazy, and let's take this as a time to reset and be more and more vigilant, not just now, but in June, and in next September, and in 2 years from now, when this kind of fades into our memory a little bit, because we know how, particularly people that are this sick, what they're capable of, and why we have to let our guard down. And that's, in a way, it's tragic for elementary kids to have their innocence lost by this, by having to be guarded about everything, but that's the world that we live in, and that's our job collectively as a community to do.
So who ultimately makes the decision, the final decision on what to be done? Because I hear the chief
Well, I
of
mean,
this,
the way the school
school board on that.
the way the school district is set by statute, the folks out here appropriate resources to us. They own the buildings, see, we own the programs. The board by statute sets policy. It's their decision. And they make decisions based on recommendations I make. I have to take them, but I make a recommendation. They discuss things and remake different recommendations. And then if it needs to be funded, we go and ask for funds. And then we, I mean, you all know how that works. So they are the final decision makers regarding that. There are school statutes and other things. There are no school statutes about this. You read the papers, there's states changing their laws right now. So this thing is in flux, as I said before. I hope to learn some more information about Monday that will bring some real, perspectives to me. Because I've got my, guns, we got guns, I think more guns. I'm around schools for 42 years. I see what happens with all good intentions. So I need to learn more about it next week and then share with the board. And then they need to discuss it, but they make the final decision.
So ultimately the board, because
Yeah.
we're asking you guys a lot of questions, but,
Yeah.
if they,
Now it's going to be time for us to educate ourselves, to go to experts and try and find out the answers as well. Hopefully you'll come to the board meetings. We've heard all of your concerns. We will take them to heart. We will definitely discuss them and try to come up with the best safety protocols that we can for our children, because ultimately it is the protection for our children. And we all have that concern.
this time you don't have any ideas. I'm not gonna lie, some other stuff.
Well,
No, I mean, like, you don't have anything that you wanna, like,
I think we've outlined, what our right now steps are. I think we pretty much told you what we're gonna do. There are longer, broader questions that were raised tonight that the board will have to deliberate over and decide whether they want to adopt those as policy. But we have security in the building. They were there today, they were there yesterday, they'll be there tomorrow. The chief has roving patrols going on right now. They'll be here the rest of the school year doing that. We've begun the assessment of the locks in the buildings, and we're hiring a vendor to go through all the buildings to tell us what we need to know about each individual building and tailor those plans to that building based on the physical setup of the plant. But there are broader questions, policy questions that were raised tonight. Those are the questions that they're going to have to deliberate on.
Right now, just so you know, our attendance rate, I thank the teachers for this because they exude that confidence in the kids. And you parents who trust us, our attendance rate is high, which is a good thing for us. We just want to make sure that, we take these steps that the mayor just pointed out. The board this is the first time they've sat together and listened to anything. They wanted to have it earlier, and I suggested to wait till now. I thought it would be better, so we be a little further away and have some things to talk about substantively. But now this is their task, to pick up this information and to try to sort through what's best for kids, not you and not me, but for kids through their eyes. And then communicate that through a resource, which is budget. That's what I feel. But I will say to you, that has not come up. The mayor has assisted us in terms of paying for these things and doing some things with some set-aside funds. But these long strategic policy things, they're going to have to debate. Because I don't think I'm sure they've heard things tonight they hadn't thought about before. Okay. I'm going to take one more and then ask if there's anything here. Do you have anything else to add before I go to bed? No? Okay.
Her arm's been up all night.
Okay.
Just like a couple of comments. I have a 6-year-old granddaughter and an 8-year-old granddaughter that go to K Street, and my 3 children went to K Street School. And yesterday and today, they both came home and told us about their safety drills and their zones and where they go. And I have to commend the teachers and the staff at K Street. The kids in no way were upset about this. They went about it like you would a fire drill. They knew what to do, where to go. They knew they were going to have a drill today. Yesterday, they knew where their safety zone was, and they went through it today, and the girls were concerned, but not overwhelmed by the whole thing. And I think there's so many variables here, but a big thing is to teach our children to be aware of their surroundings and to give the teachers and to give the parents of the community the resources they need to educate ourselves and educate the children on what to do. Teach your children on what to do if there was a fire in the house. They need to know what to do if they are at a friend's house, a play date, something happens at a friend's house, what happens at school. It's sad, but it's the the way of the world, and we need to put our resources in education, in teaching the teachers and the parents and the children what to do in case of an emergency. This is just a different type of an emergency. People get hurt all the time, and it's unfortunate. And unfortunately, I knew 7 of the families in Newtown. And one of the families lost a son, but their daughter was in another first grade class. And because of what was done in that first grade class by the teacher, because of her training, that woman lost 1 child, but she didn't lose 2 that day. So I think, yes, you look at mental health and armed guards, 1 to 10 police officers in a school is not going to stop something like this to happen. Where there's a will, there's a way. There's so many variables here that have to be looked at, but you have to be proactive and teach our children and teach the teachers, give them the resources on what to do in a case of emergency. My granddaughter is 6 years old. She knew how to line up, where to go, to stand by the wall, be quiet in her safe zone. And the 8-year-old granddaughter was a little miffed because she thought that the 6-year-old had a cooler safe zone because they went up a private staircase and she had one to go into the kindergarten class. But that was okay because she loved the kindergarten teacher who happens to be our neighbor. So it's how you present it to your children. You know, appropriate. Yes, it was a horrible thing. Some of the kids knew the families in Newtown, but it's how you teach your children to react, to respond, to have compassion, and to try to be safe. And I think our resources, some of our tax dollars have to go in that teaching the teachers what to do in this type of an emergency.
I hear you, but I'd rather take a stand.
I think that we're going to conclude this meeting now. We've heard everything that you have to say. It's up to the board now to go back and review everything and to discuss everything that we've heard today. And I think some things will be on the website. Is that correct, Dr.?
Well, we have the questions. What we're going to do is collate the questions and get them to the board and to the principal so they know what they're on set. And then we'll try to get them on their website as soon as possible.
Yeah, I encourage everybody to attend the board meeting. So when this is discussed, you can sit and listen, and there is public participation at that time as well. So thank you very much for coming out.